Okay, boxing fans, big bad blood fight on the weekend. We're going to talk about it now, give you our prediction. I'm with Paul and I'm with Rory. Really looking forward to this fight. It's going to be a good fight. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Billy Joe Saunders, or as Chris would say, average Joe Saunders, and as Billy would say, Chris Eubank Jr. So, does Chris Eubank Jr. deserve this fight, Paul?
No, but he's not the only fighter who's getting title fights after fighting bums, because he's only fighting for the European and British title. And Deontay Wilder, who's probably fought guys even worse than Eubank's opponents, he's fighting for the world title. So in this day and age, in boxing, it doesn't matter whether you've earned a fight or not. It just depends on whether the public are interested in the fight and are interested in you, isn't it? So, no, he doesn't deserve the fight, but what difference does it make?
Who cares? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What are your thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. I'd probably say there's less deserving fighters, but I'd equally argue there's more deserving fighters than Eubank. It's a promoter's dream, innit? Supply and demand. There's a massive outcry for this fight. It's going to make more money than perhaps whoever would have been a mandatory challenger to Billy Joe Saunders' European title. So, it's a decent fight. It's a pick-em sort of 50-50 fight. So there's far worse ones out there, but I still don't think he deserves it.
Yeah, I don't think he does either, personally. But like I said, it's not. Matchmaking is not about that anymore, and fighting's not like that anymore. But the best man gets the shot. You don't. Nowadays, the one who makes the most money will get the shot, and this is a big money fight for them both. There's a lot of anticipation for the fight, and in the end, everyone wants to see the fight, including me. And for that reason, Eubank's got the fight, even though he's overlooked a lot of other opponents and he's not fought anyone any good. And that will lead us directly into our next question for Paul. Will Eubank Jr. I was about to say Eubank. I shouldn't say that. Will Chris Eubank Jr.'s lack of good competition hurt him in this fight? I mean, if you compare him to Billy Joe Saunders, for example, he's not fought half as good as opposition, or anywhere near as good as opposition as he has. Paul?
Yeah, I think it will definitely hurt him, because he's not been in the trenches before in his career. He's not had a real crisis yet. I don't even think he's even been in any trouble in any fight. I can't remember him ever being hurt by anyone. Whereas Billy Joe Saunders has had a lot of good learning fights. He's had good gut checks. Fights where he's been tired and he's struggled and he's managed to grind it out. Fights where he's been behind on the cards and he's managed to pull the knockout out the bag. It's all experience, and you can't buy experience. And Eubank, okay, he's looked great knocking out these nobodies, but most fighters only do that for about, say, 6 or 7 fights. They knock over a few journeymen, and then they start having learning fights. Whereas Eubank's I don't think he's had any learning fights, at least not for a long time, because for at least 10 fights now, he's been levels above the people he's fighting. So apart from getting in a good pose in the ring and saying funny stuff, I don't get why he's fought these guys. It's not accomplished anything.
I agree. I do think he's got better, though. I will say that. I think he's got better. If you look at him at the beginning of his career and look at him now, I think he has got better technically, and his punches seem better and stronger.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But, once again, like you said, when you're fighting smarter cans, what more can you say, really?
Yeah, there's other things that we've not seen from him yet that you want to see in a prospect. We've not seen him hit on the chin. We've not seen how he reacts when he's cut. We don't see how he manages to turn the fight round if he's behind on the cards. He's not faced any problems at all in his career, and a young fighter needs to face problems in a few fights to see how they come through it and to learn. And if he runs into problems in this fight, then how's he going to deal with it? Because we've never seen him deal with any sort of problem at all in any sort of fight he's had.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. Rory, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a tough one, really. He's certainly not fought anywhere near the competition that Billy Joe Saunders has had, and the guys that he's been fighting are smarter cans. and he's blasted through them like he should do. But I think there's that many question marks. Equally, you can't say yes or no. You can't say, well, he's not going to handle it or he's not going to do this. It's just we don't know. It's one or two things. He's either blasted through all these guys because he should do and he's going to struggle with a step up, or he's blasted through all these guys because that's how easy he's found it, because he is such a good prospect. Those questions we don't know. The only thing I'd probably argue that Eubank probably has in his favour, and I know it doesn't count for much, but from what I've seen, I'd probably say Eubank has had, or has been more versed in better sparring than Billy Joe Saunders has had. Again, it's not fight, and two different worlds apart, but I think this is the first time Billy Joe Saunders has gone abroad for training in any way. When you look at Eubank Jr., who's, sparred with the likes of Froch and been over to the Mayweather gym and seems to be, picking up quite a bit away from the actual, fight, the actual fight side of things. Maybe that's where, like you said, his progression's coming from more so than who he's fighting. It's just a massive question mark, and is whether or not you believe he can or believe he won't. Yeah,
I suppose so. I mean, for me, this will be the deciding factor. Does Billy Joe Saunders, his resume, his career that he's had up to now, will that come all crumble, or will that be what makes the difference in this fight? And I think that personally, that will probably be what will make the difference. I mean, something that people might not know: Billy Joe Saunders, in his last so many fights, we'll just say the last 3, he's took 3 people's undefeated records. He's beat Gary O'Sullivan. Gary O'Sullivan just saw on the weekend, who sparked out another guy who, Chris Eubank's not faced, or a caliber of opponent that Eubank's not faced, sparked him out. Right, he beat Gary up by a points decision, wide. He beat John Ryder in a competitive fight. John Ryder, we've seen come back and victorious, and then he knocked out Blanda Mora in a good fight. In fact, it was a very competitive fight. That's the difference. I think that'll be the difference. And he also beat Jared Fletcher, who fought for the world title, paper title, not too long ago. So he's got a lot of names on his record. And when you look at Eubank Jr., he doesn't. The best fighter Eubank's faced is Bradley Price, and also Billy Joe Saunders beat him probably better, in a better fashion. Not much but just a better fashion. So that could be the deciding factor, I think. We'll move on. Has Eubank Jr.'s mind games worked, Paul?
They're not turning up to the press conferences and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely worked on Frank Warren. He's absolutely raging, isn't he?
Yeah.
Saunders is trying to give off the impression that he's not really bothered and it's all one big laugh to him, but he's got to be annoyed deep down. He's got to be. I'd be annoyed if I flew over from Marbella for the day and I pretty much came over for nothing, because he came over for the press conference in the middle of his training camp and Eubank didn't even turn up. You've got to be, something like that is bound to piss you off.
Mm-hmm.
So he's definitely, I think he'll definitely have wound Saunders up. I think even the mention of his name winds Saunders up, because Saunders has really, really gone mad at him in certain interviews. He's called him tons and tons of names. Saunders clearly doesn't like him, clearly has a bee in his arse when it comes to Chris Eubank Jr. And the Eubanks are not thick. They're going to try and play on that. They're going to try and do to Saunders what Eubank Sr. did to Nigel Benn, which is trying to make him fight on his emotions and not his brain. If Saunders has got any brains about him, he won't fall into the trap. But I think it's definitely worked to an extent, but we won't be able to see whether it's worked full kilt until the weekend. But it's definitely a clever strategy, in my opinion, for the Eubanks. Just we'll have to wait and see whether it's 100% paid off.
I agree. I mean, that is a point. He's obviously got to get on a plane and all sorts of stuff like that. And if you look back, actually, just going off on a tangent, Tony Bellew, he wound himself up against Nathan Cleverly. He wound himself up, but just when he heard his name, being in the vicinity of the guy, and he won the fight. Let's not lie. He won the fight, the recent fight, but he didn't look good. He looked shit. You know what I mean? So there is a chance that Billy Joe Saunders will wind himself up and go in the fight and not look good. Fight a whole bad game plan. I think that is what the Eubanks want, for Billy to do that. So, Brody, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's. I think it's definitely worked. If you kind of look at it and you kind of go, well, Billy Joe's the champion, the guy with the resume. He's the guy that, in theory, if it was, for argument's sake, a Carl Froch fight, he'd be, calling all the shots as the champion and so on and so forth. By the odd, and it's not, it doesn't take much to just not turn up. It's not like Eubanks had to go way out of his way just to not get in a car. But that small act here and there is taking away any of that power Billy Joe Saunders has, any of that sort of, calling the shots, any of him being the main man. And I think Billy Joe Saunders, with his upbringing, with his sort of background, as it were, quite fiery, quite hot-blooded, quite temperamental, easy to rile, and I think they've just played a bit of a blinder, really. They've taken that power away. They've put onus on Eubank calling the shots by doing something really simple. And like you said, you've seen him in interviews where he's, the sheer mention of Chris Eubank Jr.'s name is just rattling Billy Joe Saunders. It's worth an absolute treat.
Yeah, I suppose you have to admit. Yeah, I think it is. It is. You're right there, Roddy. Good points. We'll move back to Paul. Billy Joe Saunders looked in great shape in a lot of his pictures. He's been at the weight, or he says he's been at the weight for 4 weeks. Do you think that's good, or do you think that's bad?
Well, I'm not a fitness expert and I'm not a trainer, but when you hear something like that, it does make you fear about whether or not he's overtrained. Because most fighters most fighters that I've watched and read about, they all tend to make weight maybe the week of the fight, a few days before. He's making weight 4 weeks before, then you've got to hope that he's not overworking his body, he's not tiring himself out in his training camp, he's not leaving it in the gym, as the old saying goes. I really hope that's not the case. Saunders in the past, apparently, rumours are that he hasn't taken training 100% seriously. That's why he's not looked great in certain fights. It's because he struggled with his diet and he struggled to make the weight. I think, wasn't there even talk of him going up to super middleweight a few years ago? I'm sure he mentioned it. I don't think he ever... Obviously, it's not come to anything, but I remember him and Frank Warren were definitely talking about it, saying he was struggling to make the weight at middleweight.
Yeah.
And he's not a particularly big lad. There should be no way at all that he's struggling to make the weight. It was obviously because his lifestyle was wrong. So if he's made the weight already, then he's clearly made a massive, massive change, which is really good to see. But you're just hoping that he's not changed it about too much and he's not overcompensated for his previous lack of dedication.
Mm-hmm. That's right. One of the things that I remember when we interviewed, this is me and a few other guys, we interviewed Alex Ariza. He said it's a very stupid thing for fighters to come in, on the weight with weeks and weeks and weeks to go before the fight. And he says that they're all going to overtrain and they'll leave it in the gym. That could be the case in this fight. I don't know if it is going to happen. It might not happen. Maybe he needed this kind of fight just to get him, really ready and revved up. Get ready for the weight and stuff. Maybe that's the case, but I'll tell you one thing now: Billy Joe Saunders has he has nothing really for the super middleweight division, and I'm glad he's staying at this weight. In fact, I think he actually fought the same division as Golovkin as an amateur, which was welterweight. So makes you think now at middleweight they're going to move him further up, doesn't it? But to be fair to him, he was young. I'll say that. Rory.
Yeah, it's going to sound like I'm sort of bashing Billy Joe here, but I think it's a really bad move if he's on the weight that early. I think he's probably taken the jibes about his weight previously to heart, and I think he's gone and done it to prove a point. He's like we've seen, he didn't have to put photos out, he didn't have to do any of that, but he has done quite a few to show, look at the shape I'm in, kind of a bit of a, sort of a screw you to all the guys who were saying that he wasn't training hard, or that he didn't look good, or he was overweight, or whatever it may be. But I think like Paul touched on, I think he's gone way too far with that. I think he's now let sort of his heart rule his head, and he's probably done it to prove a point and trained to the nth degree to show off, to say, well, look at me, look at how good I look fitness wise, and I'm on the way 4 weeks, and he's boasting about it. But if you've got someone like Alex Ariza, who, despite what you think of him, is clearly good at his job and knows boxes and fitness and bodies, and someone like that saying it's not a good thing, then I'd trust their expertise. And I think, again, he's probably losing his head a bit with it all. He's letting the whole thing kind of get to him, and what people say get to him, and he's just trying to prove a point, and I think he might be, taking it too far, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. If you look back and, people like Ricky Hatton, I know maybe it's not the best comparison, but when he was with the Mayweather gym and he came in on weights real early and he was overtrained, he left it all in the gym, didn't he? And you got to think there is a worry about something like that happening, but it might not happen. Maybe, like I said, once again, this may be what he needs. We're not bashing Billy Joe, and you might see that later if you continue listening to what we're saying.
I mean, but, sorry to jump in, just to look at the fight that we had last weekend between Bellew and Cleverly. Look at what the figures were like. Cleverly's was much better, but come fight night, you really couldn't tell. There wasn't, it didn't necessarily stand him in good stead.
You're right, yeah. Yeah, it didn't. You wouldn't believe he was the high stamina fighter in that fight, would you?
Mm-hmm.
But okay, moving on back to Paul. Billy Joe says if he loses here, he'll retire. We only need a quick answer for this. Do you think he'll stick with that?
No, I wouldn't like him to either, because he's a great fighter, and I want to see him carry on his career even if he loses. But I'll say this about Saunders. A year ago, he was doing interviews where he was saying, if I can't knock Chris Eubank out in 5 rounds, 6 rounds, I'll retire. I swear on my son's life. And over the past year, he seems to have slowly backtracked on that. First, it was, I'll knock him out in 5 rounds, or I'll retire. Then I'll knock him out in 6 rounds, or I'll retire. And now he just seems to be saying, I'll just win. If I don't win, I'll retire. So it doesn't seem like he's maybe not confident, or maybe just not as bothered about getting the knockout now. So maybe Saunders himself is having second thoughts. That's what I think. But no, I think he should definitely carry on if he loses.
Yeah, that's right. Rory, what are your thoughts?
I definitely think he should carry on. I think it all depends on how he loses. If he was to get absolutely battered and counted out, waved off, completely gone, I think he'd probably have a fair few doubts. If it's a very close points decision, for argument's sake, there's no way he's retiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think he should. I mean, a loss doesn't mean nothing,
Yeah, exactly.
In today's boxing, a loss does mean quite a bit, because fans are stupid and don't know much about styles and different things, about boxing and stuff. But in the olden days, if fighters took a loss, they took a loss and got over it. I know great fighters who took KO losses and then just came back and have become, top 3 or 4 fighters in all time. I'll give you an example. Harry Greb got knocked out by a guy who was, I think, as an amateur, a lightweight, and this is a middleweight that we're talking about, and it's the only time he ever got knocked out. He come back from that, learned from it, and went on to be one of the greatest fighters of all time. So I'm not saying Billy Joe Saunders is the greatest fighter of all time, or it could be. I mean, just if he loses this fight doesn't mean he's not going to win a world title or not going to win again. It just means he's got to come back, go back to the drawing board, train, make a few decisions, see what he wants to do in his life. Maybe change the weight, go down a weight, go up a weight, do what he wants to do. But he shouldn't retire off a loss. I think that's crazy.
I know, there's far too many good fighters that have had a loss that it's absolutely nothing.
I think Bernard Hopkins lost his first fight. So did both Rafael Marquez and what's the other Marquez? Juan Manuel Marquez. They all lost their first fights.
Yeah.
I think what it is, well, as Rory said earlier on, Saunders, he's got a traveller's background. He's a proud lad. He's clearly hot blooded. I think what it is it was just his ego running wild a little bit.
Yeah,
he doesn't like Saunders. He got himself a bit worked up, and it's all it was. It was just his mouth. Running his mouth a bit too much, rather. He was thinking with his heart, not with his head.
I suppose some people always say, people say things they don't mean, don't they?
Yeah, and I suppose you can't really fault someone for having too much heart, can you?
No. No, you cannot. So we'll go into the prediction now. Paul, give us your prediction. Quick one.
Saunders to win a unanimous decision.
Okay. Rory?
Controversial. Eubank stops Billy Joe Saunders between 10 and 12 rounds.
I think it's going to be close, but I'm going to say Billy Joe Saunders decision, just because I've not seen enough from Eubank against good opposition. If I'd seen him fight some of the guys that Billy Joe would beat, like, Eamon O'Kane, he's a shit fighter, but if he fought him and beat him, or what's the other guy, Spike O'Sullivan, if he fought him, Nick Blackwell, if he fought him, I would have more to go on and I'll be more confident, but I can't back it up, so I've got to say Billy Joe.
Yeah, my prediction is very much on a hope rather than any great confidence.
Okay, thanks for listening, guys. Tell us what you think and who's going to win.